You guys ready to talk about divorce? Because I love talking about divorce. That sounds weird for a married person to say, but it is true. This past year, I also spent far too much time asking people if they watched The Valley on Bravo. I asked the doctor who diagnosed me with GERD if she watched The Valley on Bravo. And when she and other people said no, I launch into an explanation of the show that is very similar to what I am about to say right here. The Valley is a follow-up / spin-off of Vanderpump Rules, which is a Bravo show that followed servers and bartenders who really wanted to be actors and musicians, kind of, through their messy 20s. Lots of drinking, lots of drugs, lots of sex and betrayal, and eventually, even for the most toxic couples, marriage, sometimes to each other. The Valley follows one of those couples and their other couple friends as they settle into marriage and parenthood in the San Fernando Valley. By the end of the first season, 2 of the couples are filing for divorce, and that is not surprising. They should have never been married. Their relationships were definitely unhealthy long before they decided to throw big, elaborate weddings and buy big, expensive houses and have children, which are also expensive, but that's not the main thing I would say about kids. But I understand why these people got married to each other, even though all of the signs said no, red flag. All of the flags were like, I'm a red flag, don't do this. I understand why they got married because this is part of our cultural script. I happen to have married twice, married really well. I am 2 for 2 with good marriages, but there was a period in my life where I would have married anyone. Any of the very incompatible boyfriends that I was with in my 20s, I would have married if they had asked me, if they had wanted to marry me, which makes me cringe. Internally, externally, physically, emotionally, full spiritual cringe. But it also makes me breathe a huge sigh of relief that I dodged a bullet that nobody was even interested in aiming at me. I would have done it. I would have married any of those people, not because I was necessarily ready for it or because I was so in love with the right person, but because it felt like an invisible clock was ticking and I was going to miss the on-ramp into adulthood. I was raised by married parents in a Catholic community of married parents. My uncle was divorced, but I actually didn't even really know that because it happened before I was born, and his ex-wife was always around, and I don't know who I thought she was my mom's sister. We have a very big family. Both my parents have 8 siblings each, so things get confusing. The point is that divorce was only something that I knew through movies and TV, and it scared me. This idea that one day your parents just might not love each other and you'd have to spend half your nights in a weird smelling apartment or meeting your mom's boyfriends. And my parents did make marriage look appealing. They each had their own friends, they had their own fun, they flirted with each other, they liked each other. They met young and married young and became parents young, and when I was 25 and no longer felt young, side note, you're young. If you're 25 and watching this, 27 and watching this, 30 and watching this, you've got time, baby. Okay, you're okay. But I did not think I had time. I was fully panicked. I wanted to fall in love, have a wedding, buy a house, have some babies. The groom in this to-do list was a vague outline and not a specific person. I didn't meet my first husband until I was 27, and I thought that was so old. What? And it was just like I thought it would be. It just happened. It was easy. We liked each other. We loved each other. And then, of course, he died of brain cancer. But you know what? I wouldn't change it. I would change that he died. I would change that, but you can't change anything, really. But given the choice, I would not go back and marry any of those other guys who are still alive because I would have missed out on what I found with Aaron, and I wouldn't have found Matthew because, of course, there's no changing the past, but if you change one small thing, you change everything, and that is what the multiverse has taught me. But like I said, I am 2 for 2 with good marriages to good men. I feel like my marriage is healthy and fun. I feel like it's equitable. If anything, it slants more towards me. We've definitely built a different kind of marriage than the ones that our parents had. Matthew handles the home. I work outside of the home. I have the kind of marriage that has benefited men for forever, and it works for us. At its best, I believe marriage is partnership in the truest sense. It is two people pulling in the same direction, building something together that benefits both of them and any children they have and any other people that they care about, hopefully society as a whole. It probably sounds cold to call it a strategic alliance, but it is. And it has been for nearly forever. The idea of romantic marriage and big weddings and wedding registries and weddings as an industry is very new. My grandparents got married on an army base. I've got a picture. Let me get it. Hold on. Look how cute they are. Wait, is that in? That's them. She's wearing like the one suit she owned. He's wearing his army outfit. I don't know what you guys call it. Uniform. And then look at, there she is. That's her brother who's at the wedding. That's her brother right there, who is friends with my grandpa. And two other just guys. They got married. Okay. It was that simple. It was that simple. You know, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is like, all that's pretty new. Okay. But this same grandma used to tell me there's a difference between a wedding and a marriage. A wedding is a party. It's a ceremony. A marriage is a legally binding contract between you and another person that you believe will love you forever. And yet, I have helped pick up the pieces of many, many broken hearts in recent years. I have watched mostly women recover from divorces where a man who once loved them more than anything else dragged them through an expensive and emotionally and financially draining divorce process, a process that feels designed to break people, but specifically women. I have urged people to get prenups and postnups and to legalize the potential ending before they commit to a legal beginning. I'm fun. I have not gotten a wedding invite in a while. I think that's my age. Who knows? Actually, I'm going to a wedding next year for my baby cousin, who's apparently 30, 27, I don't know. But when I found out he was getting married, I was like, you're too young. That's too young to be getting married. Anyways, back to divorce. Okay, before we talk about Jack's wedding, let's talk about divorce. One of my favorite books of the year so far is, where is it? Oh boy. Guys. Oh, found it. This book. It's called This American Ex-Wife, How I Ended My Marriage and Started My Life. It's by Liz Lenz. It is a book that I imagine would be unsettling to see on your wife's bedside table. And it is a book that I, as a married person who loves being married so much that I've done it twice, really have no business loving as much as I do, except that it is not just a book about divorce or Liz's divorce specifically. It is a book that examines the institution of marriage itself, particularly in the United States, where marriage can seem, to tie it back to the Valley, almost compulsory. Like, yes, there is love and there is romance, but in my experience and in many conversations that I've had, it can also feel a little bit like an obligation, like a level of adulthood that you must unlock in order to truly become an adult. It's the next obvious thing to do after you've dated someone for a certain amount of time and experience a certain amount of happiness. That sounds really cynical. I'm sorry. But a note about the interview that you're going to hear with Liz, it does focus mostly on straight marriages and marriages with children, which is the kind that she experienced, the kind that I have experienced. But I do think that the emotional truths will resonate with a lot of people. So here we go. Most of what we learn about marriage, we learn from observation. So I want you to tell us about the picture of marriage that you saw when you were growing up.
Well, sorry, Mom and Dad, but I did not see happiness. I saw two people who were constantly at war with each other. My mom had 8 children. I'm number 2. She homeschooled us. You know, this is in the 80s and the early 90s when homeschooling was like really not talked about. It was actually only like lightly legal, like my parents actually like lobbied a lot of senators to help, make it more legal. And so I think it makes sense if you look at some of my other writing that you realize like, oh, a lot of Liz's early years were like spent lobbying to legalize homeschooling. And so, but like my mom, she was like, making bread from scratch, breastfeeding. She was trad mom. She was sewing us jean jumpers, right? And my dad would wake up every morning, get into his, little Taurus, drive to the office, and come back maybe by dinner time. And they fought all the time too, and they were both people who I think the most generous way I can say this, like, had hairpin tempers, and so we just never knew where we were gonna be, and so there was just like, they were constantly at war, but they would always say like, but we're gonna stay together. We're gonna, and, I think, there's, and my siblings will, a couple of my siblings will agree with this, is just like, we were like, why? And it had, and that was the picture of marriage I got. I never saw, there were definitely moments I saw where it was like my parents really enjoy each other, but most of what I saw was just them fighting constantly, and then when they weren't fighting, my dad was just never around. But I also think of like the other marriages I saw, because again, like I was in a very non-traditional childhood where I'm homeschooled, our lives are home and church. And then, the other families that we knew too, they weren't happy. These dads were not like fun dads to be around. They were angry. They were gone. When they were there, they were sitting at the table griping about something in the news. And that was the model of marriage that I saw growing up. And I knew that I didn't want that. I knew that I wanted the opposite of that. But how do you do that, right? Like, how do you get that roadmap?
Yeah, I always think about, I'm remarried, I'm widowed, my husband is divorced, and the kids that he brought to the marriage were 9 and I think almost 14 or freshly 14 when we got together. So old enough to, kind of understand, old enough to, at that age, I would have been so disgusted to know that my parents were like human beings. I would have been like, ew. It's like, I cannot think of anything more revolting to me than my dad having a girlfriend. When I was a child, like I would have been like, But I also think like it was hopefully, I think long-term beneficial for them to see a relationship develop and see what a marriage could be, because we're just born, if we're born to married parents, we're born into a marriage, and we are born into whatever that relationship is, but we have no context for how they got there or who they were before. We're 2 weeks apart, which, yes, I had to Google your birthday because all the cultural references, I was like, we are either mystery sisters or we were born at the exact same age, and we were. But I grew up in a Catholic family, in a Catholic neighborhood, in a Catholic school. My neighbor across the street got divorced, which was terrifying to me, truly horrifying. Her dad moved into an apartment. Her mom was dating. I was like, I was like dysregulated by this. I was unsettled by her parents'
You're going
divorce.
to therapy for that, your friend's
I was like,
parents' marriage.
I was like, you can't get a divorce? Like, I've never heard of such a thing. Like, what is going on? Like, but it sounds like you, as a kid, were like, I don't know. I don't think divorce is that bad. What was your... what was divorce in your culture growing up?
So no, it was awful. I think we didn't understand why people would just be miserable. But I don't think divorce was ever something, even when I was married, it took so much for me to imagine my life as divorce because, growing up, my very good friend, and they were my parents' very good friends, and I'm still friends with them. Rochelle, I love you. But her parents both were on their second marriage. And so they had they had been divorced and they had remarried. But the whole story was like they had both been cheated on and they had both left their marriages. And it was like, oh no, we would have stayed married except for, these awful philandering others. This was a story that was told to me. I'm not sure exactly how rooted in truth it is, but and that was just like, well, that's the only way. And then, I think there was this real narrative of like Christians stick together. You always stick together. Marriages aren't built for your happiness. They're built for your holiness, which is a thing that is still said. And, and so it was like, divorce was like, my parents were screaming. I mean, I remember one fight in the middle of the night. My dad left and he was gone for like 3 months. And I just remember my mom being like, no, we'll always stay married. As if, because we didn't know, like, the implication was, even if this is bad, what lies on the other side could be worse. And so we will never go there. And yeah, so I thought that like, you only got divorced if the person like, cheated on you essentially. And now I know there's so many worse ways to hurt a person than infidelity. Like actually, like we build it up as this like huge awful thing in our culture, and like betrayal is and can be so hurtful, but also like it's really not the worst thing. And I think that like, yes, so growing up, divorce was just like never on the table. And even as I was like going through some really hard things in my marriage, I was like, well, I just gotta get through. I just gotta get through this, and I kept actually hoping. I was like, maybe he'll find someone else and then leave me. And it was just, which is ridiculous for an introverted engineer in the Midwest. That man's not out meeting women. Like, good God.
With a ring on?
With a ring on, like, man. Like,
you
know what I mean? Like, God bless. And he is remarried now, but like, and so much happier. And, but yes, that was divorce growing up. And, in the Bible, it says God hates divorce, right? So this was like, this is a big one. You don't lie and you don't get divorced. Turns out the two are kind of connected.
Yeah. God hates divorce, but God doesn't mind your unhappiness at all. And in fact, so much of the culture around marriage that you were describing, I did not grow up evangelical, but, we are meant to take marriage prep classes, which are either taught by a couple who is in the Catholic Church or sometimes also by a priest who has never been married, but is, I guess, observed marriages from the outside. And there's a scene in your book where you're describing pretty much every bridal shower that I've ever been to. And I had not thought about it until you pointed it out, that a tradition at bridal showers is married women, older women, essentially preparing the bride-to-be for her future misery.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found that so sad.
It is so sad. I didn't even think about it until I went to a bridal shower while my marriage was falling apart. And, I was like, what are we doing here? And, you have those conversations where, like, I remember we had all these, like, couple friends when my ex and I were first married and moved to Iowa. We had these like lovely couple friends, and I remember once, and this was like nobody had babies, and we'd like have book clubs and hang out, and we were all hanging out one time. I like had a chocolate fountain that I got from Kohl's, so I'd always break out the chocolate fountain.
Yes.
We would just, drink beer and dip things in the chocolate fountain and go to bed whenever we wanted. And but I remember one of these nights, like, I think it was me complaining about the cleaning. How I was always doing the cleaning, and we're with all the wives are like, yeah, it's so terrible. And all of a sudden, this one woman goes, well, John cleans all the time. And we were just like, what? And because it was so normalized for us to complain about this, and she's like, John cleans all the time, and John's like, yeah, like it's just two of us, and she's got a full-time job, and so do I. So like, yeah, I clean the bathroom every week and, sweep the floors at night. And I remember another husband looking at him and being like, be quiet, you're going to ruin it for the rest of us. And I was like, people probably don't think this about me, but I do have people-pleasing tendencies. I don't think there's ways that, like, I'm still a Midwestern white lady. I'm like, it's okay, it's fine. So I just remember being like, ha ha ha, isn't that so funny? These gender jokes are so funny. But it's one of those things that just plays in my mind every once in a while. And I'll just be like, they said it.
Yeah.
They said the part, and then you go to these, and then I think once you break two, things look different, and the way that this misery is normalized. Like, I've had a lot of people say to me, like, oh, well, don't you think that you just believed in marriage because you grew up religious? And I was like, you could just grow up on, Nora Ephron movies. Yeah, like, this is not, I was like, yes, I couch it in the religious terms because I do think religion influences even the way non-religious people think of marriage. But, and I don't think they really even understand how they've been influenced. But, it's everywhere, and that normalizing of the misery is literally everywhere. And so that the moment a woman says, like, and that's why I really wanted to write this book and make it a little bit bigger than just my experience, because I was like, nobody cheated. Nobody hit anybody. I just literally couldn't wash one more fucking floor at the expense of my sanity and my career.
Yeah. Yes. And, Cheryl Strayed says famously that wanting to leave is enough. Wanting to leave is enough. And in the beginning of your book, you mentioned how from the moment that you were open about the divorce process, getting a divorce, married women would just start whispering to you, right? Like telling you secrets, asking you questions, the same question over and over, which I'm obviously going to ask you now, which is, when do you know it's time to go?
If you are asking that question, it is time to go. Here's the thing, and here's the thing that happens all the time, and I'm going to tell you it's a thing that happens, and it is still going to happen. What happens is women will be sad and miserable and unhappy, and being unhappy is enough. Your happiness is enough. And if you hear that phrase and you think, what? No, it's time for you to go because you're not prioritizing your happiness. But women do this thing where they will read books about marriage and they'll be like, well, even if I am unhappy, my partner does X, Y, and Z, which is better than that woman's partner, so I should stay. We're constantly trying to move the lines and justify the behaviors of our partners to fit this idea of what we think life and love and romance should look like. Because we are told that our identity as women is only worth something if we have a partner, if we have children, and if we have a home. And listen, you don't believe me? Go take a peek at the political discourse right now and who is getting insulted and for why, and it's single childless cat ladies. And why? Because they don't have those markers of what we believe makes women worthwhile. And, of course, any woman who has any of those things can say, yeah, I got all of them and now they just tied me down. And it's like, yeah, that was a trap. It was a trap all along. But I think we play these games where we try to negotiate those lines because, well, if you break away, you have to build something new, and that can be far scarier. And it's stunning to me, and it continues to be stunning to me, the things people will tell me that they put up with from their partners, and yet they're still committed to staying. I did a book event with Eve Rotsky where a woman stood up and said her partner flat out refused to help with the kids, refused to help with chores, refused to even like read the Eve Rotsky Fair Playbook and negotiate, refused to even sit at the table and discuss these things. And she looked me dead in the eyes and goes, but I don't want a divorce because I don't want to do that to my family. Like, your family is already broken, but so what do I do next? And I was like, you want me to justify you staying? And I was like, then I guess you just are miserable for the rest of your life. I don't know what to tell you, but that is, I think, that's the negotiation game that I think we play. It's that game of comparison, which is another reason I wanted my book to be bigger, to hold more stories than just my own, to show research and journalism, to say, it is not just you. This is not a personal failure. This is a systemic problem. It's a problem with the way we have built our idea of what marriage is. It's the way we built it into our tax law. It is the way that it works out when we don't have universal health care or child care. And it's the pay gap. It's all of these things that combine to make this crushing reality. And the sociologist Jessica Calarco has this incredible book, Holding It Together. In that book, she has this profile of a man. She's a sociologist. These are all real interviews. She did years studying this. And there is a man who says this. He goes, yeah, I think it would be great if we had universal childcare, but if we had that, my wife would go back to work, and I like having dinner made for me at the end of the day. And it's the same thing of like, don't ruin it for the rest of us. And so, yeah.
That's a man who's never heard of restaurants.
A man who's never, well, they're expensive, Nora. So,
yeah,
I mean, God.
Yeah. Which you mentioned so much. And I was raised by, as an adult, I see things in my parents' marriage that are definitely not for me. But I really was given I think, an interesting view of marriage. My dad was like, marriage isn't romance, buddy. Like right away. He's like, you want romance? Go watch a Disney movie. Okay. Marriage is a partnership. It is a strategic alliance. It is, all of these things, like obviously financially and, like you're building something at its ideal. You're trying to build something that benefits all of you. My parents had very unique lives. Like they never took vacations together. Like my mom took her trips with her girlfriends. My dad took his trips with his guy friends. Every once in a while, we might go somewhere as a selection of children with a parent. I don't remember really going on any trips with the two of them, but my mom worked. My mom also did all the housework, all of it, except the laundry, which my dad was the best at, okay? But like my mom would come home after a long day of work, just as long as my dad's, if not longer, and like make dinner. And he never made dinner. And if he did have to make us dinner, you know what we ate, Liz? We ate poached eggs, the only thing he could make. Runny poached eggs. How many children want poached eggs? 0% of children in the U.S. want a runny poached egg for dinner, Stephen. None of us want that. None of us wanted that. He was like, it's what's for dinner.
My dad never cooked for us, but if he did, he would take, this is like the production line when you have so many children. Oh my. But he would line up all these slices of bread, put peanut butter on the top row, jelly on the bottom row, slap them together, and then cut them into quarters, and he would just throw them on this like big pile of plate, big mountain of peanut butter and jelly, throw it on the table, and maybe if we were lucky, there was a bag of chips and lemonade.
Oh, so. Maybe. Yeah, it's like the standard is different. But one of the things I wanted, that was going somewhere. I was going somewhere with this, which is the cost of marriage for women. And you were talking about, when you got married and you moved to Iowa and you've got your little couple friends and you're in your 20s. And like, I didn't get married till 27, which I was literally like, RIP, my life is over. I'm an old maid. I'll die alone because I'm also a Midwest girl. And now I look at a 27-year-old and I'm like, you're a child bride. There's no way it's legal for you to walk down the aisle. You can't consent to this. Right. You're 27 years old. But there's something about, it's not even pressure. It's a part of this cultural script where these are like levels of adulthood that you unlock.
Yes.
But it's more important for women, right? Like no one says, even though you should look slightly askance at the childless, unmarried men of the world, right? Yeah. I don't think childless cat ladies are doing kidnappings and serial killing. Okay.
And here,
That's not something that,
like,
sorry. So
no, I'm a single
I lost
lady.
it. Yeah.
I'm a single lady. I date men, and I will meet these men. I two summers ago, I dated a man, smart, handsome, worked for the university, had a couple of dates, and I think at some point he was like, you know, he said, I don't think it's gonna work out between us, and I was kind of on the fence about it. I was like, oh yeah, really, like, okay, and he's like, well, I just like want a family, and I was like, you're 47. Your eggs are, I was kind of joking with him. I was like, your eggs are dried up. And I was like, what's your plan, big guy? You went to Harvard. Do you got a plan here? And I was like, what are you going to do? I was like, any woman you date who is age appropriate is almost done. Like, she's almost cooked. And so, like, what's your plan? You going to go date a 20-year-old? What are you going to do? You don't want to take time off of your career. Like, are you going to help? I was like, have you thought this through? And he, like, it literally, he's looking at me like it had literally never occurred to him.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not offended that you have said this to me. I'm just saying that, like, you know, and it just showed the difference in, it just showed the difference, right? Like, in the way that women are trying to think and plan and adjust our lives. And, you know, some of the most successful, and again, that we keep saying this is religious Midwestern. No, I've got East Coast friends who are the most successful people you will ever meet, in awe of them, in their 30s, and like, oh, well, how am I gonna, you know, do this? I'll never find a man. I'm an old lady. It's done for me. And you're just like, girls, shh. But yes, like, I mean, that difference is just like it. There's no, and now we have a male loneliness problem, right? Because all these little Peter Pans, like, refuse to commit, and now they're all out there in their mid-40s being like, well, maybe I want a family now, and women are like, well, we learned to live without you, and we're doing great.
Yeah, or we built a family.
Yeah, or we built a family, and it's like, and like what you want a 40-year-old woman to like give up her life so she can have a geriatric pregnancy for you? What's on offer? What do you bring to the table?
Yeah, and almost die because childbirth is so dangerous, which also was never revealed to me. It's a beautiful miracle, and it's getting worse.
It's getting worse in America because of the fall of Roe, and you blue states are not immune from this same problem. So anyway,
it's all, this is like, in this video I'm going to put galaxy brain, we're going to put like, you know, red thread connecting all of these things,
right?
But
crazy wall, you know, it's like it's the serial killer crazy wall. Yeah.
But like in my 20s, you know, I would have seen your wedding pictures. I would have seen, you know, I had friends who went to schools right by yours, who got married right out of college, and I was at those weddings, and I was a bridesmaid thinking, wow, it's just not going to happen for me. I'm 23. I don't know, like, the clock is ticking, and it felt like this level of adulthood to unlock, right? Like, we're going to register for these things, and I'm going to have a chocolate fountain and have all my friends over, and we're going to like show everyone what adults we are. And
there will be mason jars.
And there will be mason jars. There will be vacuums, and there will be picking up someone's socks and commiserating over the phone with our friends. And also at the same time, you and I, younger millennials, are being simultaneously brainwashed into girl boss feminism. There is no glass ceiling. Lean In came out when I was pregnant with my first child. I read that on my maternity leave. I thought, I've done it. I am doing it. I am doing it. And I came back from that maternity leave to find that all of my brilliant strategic work at my marketing job was being executed and given credit to a man who was my peer, who had not come up with any of these ideas and would not give me any of the work to do. And I really didn't have anything of worth to do. And what I want to talk about is that, like, the opportunity cost of marriage, career. I worked, we both worked, you know, till the day Aaron died, essentially. Our kid was in daycare, which cost so much money. The cost of daycare has only gone up. So I'm like, I understand when it makes sense to have someone stay home and take care of the kids, it also frightens me when it is a woman that I know, because I know you are sacrificing the exponential growth of your retirement account, and that 5 years out of the workforce might as well be 500 in some industries. And there are no protections or compensations for most marriages formalized that protect mostly women from that loss. I want you to talk about like career, raising children, how all of that came to be, which again are never questions that I've ever asked a man and never will.
And that's the thing, like it really frustrates me when I hear people say, well, parenting is just so hard. It's just so hard to do it all. It's like, it's not hard for your husband. It is not. So why are you mad at the demands of parenting when your husband's not sharing in that equal load? I think something that really, really radicalized me was, I had 2 children pretty close together, 2 years and 3 months apart, and I was overloaded. I was trying to get everything done. I didn't have regular childcare. This little church near our house. I live in Iowa, so they do this like 4 days a week, 4-hour thing. It was pretty affordable, but even then, the ex still griped about the cost, and but also like 4 hours a day for
it's
4
not
days
helpful.
a week. It's not
so
helpful.
Not helpful. You're
And
like, I just dropped you off. I can't get into a flow state.
Right.
And then I have to leave a half hour.
And
before,
I also need to go to the dentist sometime.
Yes.
And so I was in this like mom babysitting group as well. I was waking up at like 4 a.m. to meet my deadlines, to write. And this is also like around my youngest was around 2 to 3 when things started really clicking into place for me. I was being able to write stories that I really cared about, instead of the one hits for the blogs or whatever. And which is fine. I'm fine. I did my time in the trenches, but the internet sewer. I was so frustrated. I was like, it's so hard to be a working mom. So hard to be a working mom. And then I got divorced, and then I realized it's actually not hard to be a working mom if your partner does have to work. And that was when I was like, oh, huh. And that was an unexpected side effect. And so there's a couple things happening, as I think it's easier for us to blame our children than it is to expect our partners to be fully functioning, equal participatory adults. Because your kids, you can actually talk to, and just, I am so right here. But also, I think too, right, like we were sold, us elder and younger millennials, we were sold a bill of goods. We were told second wave feminism had solved everything. We were in, middle school, high school in the 90s when the pay gap was closing and women were entering the workforce at this high rate, rock and roll, Lilith Fair, women were equal. We had done it.
I was at the first Lilith Fair, guys. Let the record
your
show.
Face.
I
so
was
jealous.
there. I was there. And I was dropped off. I was in middle school. My cousin and I were dropped off
Middle school.
at Canterbury Downs.
Your mom
there were no
is
cell phones.
Insane.
I think they gave us $10 of spending money. I think we split 1 root beer and we're out in the sun alone and unsupervised for
and
like
you
12
walked
hours.
uphill both ways. Like, this is like...
How did they find us how did we get home? I was not frightened at all, but I wasn't frightened. It was all women.
It was all women.
Mostly lesbians. It was the most glorious.
Yes.
I did not know that having my first concert be Lilith Fair was going to be like, set an unrealistic expectation for public events moving forward. But okay, yes, that was the era.
Yeah. And I think there was this real, and I talk about it in the book a little bit when I talk about the chicks and, you know, this like sense of like, especially in music, there's this sense of like growing equality, and all of a sudden all you had to see was a woman step over the line like the chicks did in the Bush era and criticize the president, and poof, you were done. They were done, you know. And we saw it as we got older. We saw it happen in our own lives where we were like, oh, we got equality. And then we'd have children and we'd be like, where did that equality go? But we were so busy, we couldn't question it. And then we witnessed the 2016 election, and you could not shatter. That was bulletproof glass ceiling. And we thought we could have broken it because we had been told. And I think what we were really taken by surprise was the virulent misogyny on all sides of the political spectrum that reared its ugly head. And so, yes, I too get really upset and worried when I see a friend I know exit the workforce because, you know, they'll be like, well, I just earn less. It's like, why do you think you earn less? Because we never solved the pay gap. Because that exists, and then disingenuous people will be like, oh, the pay gap exists because women don't want to work. It's like, no, that's not true. The pay gap exists even for women who are not parents and who are not taking the space. And so it's like, it is not an accident when, you know, you are both looking at who makes the most and, you know, who you can sacrifice, which I don't think you should do. I think you should combine. I think you should look at both salaries, add them together, and split it in half. But I think we should look at it a little differently. But when it's not an accident that when we look at the salaries, a woman is making less. Even if she's more qualified than a man for a job, she's making less than him. And so we do not have, you know, federally mandated parental leave policies. And also, interestingly enough, in countries that do have them, men are still less likely to take it. So, anyway, and so it's not an accident that this has happened. And it's not an accident that, like, we're not funding, you know, childcare, because it takes women out of the workforce, which takes away competition, right? Like, for men. And then, you can't get back in. And then you think, like, oh, this love of my life is gonna take care of me. Maybe.
Yeah.
But
Maybe.
what I keep telling people, you have no guarantees. Like, you do not know what will happen, even if this is like the best man in the entire world. He could die. Like, you know what I mean?
I'll tell you, they do it.
They do. Sometimes they do. Like, it's not enough just to say this person is going to take care of me. And also, I think that, like, a lot of women sit around and say, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. It is hard, but why is it hard? It's not hard because of the teachers. It's not hard because of your children. It is hard because you have two adults. And statistically, and people always want to fight with me. They always want to be like, well, my husband does this. Or a man will be like, I do equal. Then explain the statistics to me. Go read just one study. Any study, they'll all show the same fucking thing. Men are not doing equal housework. They're cooking less than they were even 10 years ago. And they're not doing as much childcare. Explain to me why single mothers, even those who have full custody, still have more free time, more leisure time, more time to sleep than their equally married counterparts. So the system is broken and it's a problem, and we ask women all the time, how do you do it? How do you do it? And these are good conversations to have, and I think women should have them. But I also think we need to hold our partners, the other adults in our lives, accountable for their lack of help. And that's really, really hard, and I know it, because when you start doing that, you could break apart your life. Because once you're honest, once you have to say the truth and hold people accountable to the truth, there's no going back.
I really do love being married, truly. But I never took a moment of my life before marriage to think about the possibility of happiness outside of a marriage. It really did feel like the only way to be an adult and the only way to have happiness But marriage does not make you more grown up. It doesn't make you more respectable or more worthy or special. It just makes you married. And I don't think that marriages have to last forever. I don't think that divorce is evil, even if I have been witness to divorces that did break my heart too from the outside. But we can't really talk about divorce or even marriage without talking about a lot of the things that Liz talked about, which is a general lack of a social safety net in the US, which is what historically has driven women into or trapped them in marriages, whether or not they were happy ones. The pay gap, the cost of childcare, the cost of living. It is expensive to be alive in 2024. It's even more expensive to be single in 2024. Our grandparents, maybe they were blissfully happy, but our grandmothers might have stayed married because they didn't have formal educations, or they didn't have the ability to get a mortgage or a bank account or even a credit card without a husband to sign for it. Or maybe they were happy, who knows? But marriage is, and now more than ever, it is optional. And since the 1950s, that gap between married and unmarried people in the US has closed by the tens of millions. And again, if my husband is watching this, I like being married to you. And I like it in part because we have both been married before. And in building this marriage, we have done a lot of work to avoid some of the issues that Liz addresses in this book and in this interview. And we had a lot of really uncomfortable conversations before and during our marriage. After, I almost said before and during our marriage. I almost said after our marriage, but we are still married. And one of those issues is that I am not saddled with all of the domestic labor, or even a majority of it. I am not doing all of the emotional labor. And even though I have the kind of stay-at-home partner that men have benefited from having for forever, we have actually formalized this part of our relationship and our marriage to make sure that he is not subject to the same economic impacts that typically fall on a woman in this situation. So he is compensated for the work that he does in our home. We max out a separate retirement account for him. He has options so that if he ever decides he doesn't want to be married to me, if our marriage ever ends for any reason, he's not penalized for what he contributed to our home and my success. He is never going to be trapped with me the way generations of women have been. And that's important to me, especially after watching a lot of women I know realizing in their divorce process how screwed they were by fulfilling the role of stay-at-home mom. And that is not to say that staying at home with your kids is the bad choice or the wrong choice. First of all, I do not think anybody works harder than a stay-at-home parent. Oh my God. I just think it's worth something. That's all. I just think it's worth something. I just want everybody to be protected. I really do love marriage, but I also love a good divorce. I love a good divorce, and I wish that we had more compassion for divorced people, for ourselves as we're going through divorces. And I wish that we could look at divorces not as failed marriages or failed relationships, but as ones that were successful in giving you what you needed or teaching you something. I feel really bad for the way that we all talked about Gwyneth Paltrow when she was consciously uncoupling. That's how we should be doing it, okay? Everyone should be allowed to consciously uncouple. Everybody should be like, yeah, I don't hate him. Let's not hate each other. Anyways, you can also get Liz's book wherever you can get it. We also link that in our show description. We do put some affiliate links down there, and that is just kind of a way to support our work. You never have to pay more when you click one of those links, but it's like stealing from the rich, a bookseller, and giving it to us, or, you know, whatever, the lipstick, whatever. No pressure, but we have that linked there too. I'm Nora McInerny. This has been terrible. Thanks for asking. Our team here at Feelings & Co. is me, Nora McInerny, Marcel Malakibu, Claire McInerny, and Grace Berry. Our supporting producers are Natalie, Lillian Campbell, Katie Smith, Kim Morris, Bethany Nickerson, Rachel Humphrey, Jamie Zimmerman, and David Farr. Supporting producers are Patreon members who support us at the highest level. They are all incredibly good looking. Our theme music is by Joffrey Lamar Wilson. Bye.